Hey there, guys. It's Nick, the ASMR nerd, and welcome to another episode of Relaxing Reviews. So, I have to start off with an apology. An apology because I may have inadvertently misled you. It's not something I'm proud of, not something I like to do often, or at all, really. A while back, some time ago, I put out a review for a keyboard called the Womier K87. You might remember this board. It's got quite the unique aesthetic. It has this all frosted acrylic case. So when the LEDs are illuminated, you get this beautiful diffuse lighting across the whole case. It's gorgeous. I really like that board, and I titled that video, "Is This Peak RGB?" which, granted, slightly clickbaity, but as well, it implies that that is perhaps the most RGB you can pack into a mechanical keyboard. Well, my friends, time makes a fool of us all, because today I'm reviewing the K87, which is kind of the bigger brother of the Womier K86. Now, in the intervening months, Womier has changed their name to GamaKay. GamaKay? I don't know why. Womier was no better or worse a name, but anyway, this is the GamaKay K87. Well, the K86 was a compact, kind of almost, 65% keyboard, really. The K87 takes on the more standard tenkeyless layout, which is like a full-size keyboard minus the numpad. It's a little more palatable and a little less intimidating for most people. So we're going to be taking a look at the K87 here today, but the aesthetics are not the only thing that matter about this keyboard. There have been several significant upgrades from the K86, not the least of which is the inclusion of hot swappable sockets, which means that you can freely swap out the switches in this keyboard without having to desolder or solder in new switches or anything like that. So that makes this keyboard, in theory, very flexible, very appealing to people who want to experiment. But we're not stopping there. This isn't just a review. Because I really loved the K86 and how extra it was with its frosted acrylic case, I wanted to take this keyboard to the next level for RGB. So today we're also going to be doing some modification of this board. We're going to be swapping out the stock keycaps for my favorite, some pudding caps, which is a type of keycap that has a translucent base, and that will allow more of the RGB backlighting to shine through. Guys, we are creating maximum RGB today. But in addition to that, I want to demonstrate how easy these hot swap sockets are to use. So I'm going to be swapping out the stock Gateron switches on this board for some Kale box whites, which are some of my very favorite clicky switches. Along the way, we're going to throw on some O-rings, and we're going to try and make for a really nice sounding and incredible looking keyboard. Perhaps the best part of all this is that the Womier GamaKay K87 costs only $80 US. You can find a link to that down in the video description if you would like to check it out, along with the keycaps that I'm going to use here today, which are regularly available for about $20 for the full set on Banggood, and the O-rings and the switches. They're all going to be linked down in the video description. So if you like what you see here today, you can check them out down there. And a portion of your purchase does come back to support the channel, which I appreciate very much if you choose to do that. But let's not get ahead of ourselves here. The first thing is to unbox this board, take a look at it before we get into modifying, typing test, all that good stuff. So without further ado, let's take a look at the GamaKay K87. And here we have the Womier slash GamaKay, I guess, K87 in box. And it's a very humble box. That said, it is a step up from the box for the Womier K86 that I reviewed some time ago. That one was literally just like a blank cardboard box. This one at least has kind of a stencil-y image of the keyboard on it and a bit of branding. So we have here Womier HSK87 colored glaze mechanical gaming keyboard. And again, I think that glaze here, just like on the previous Womier board, actually means frosted. And I think it's a mistranslation because like a glaze is like something you might put on a cake or, you know, like a coffee cake or something, right? It's like an icing, but frosting is too. So I wonder if that's some kind of localization, mistranslation error there. Anyway, they call it glazed, but they mean, of course, frosted acrylic. Really nothing to see on the front other than just this stencil image of a very plain 87 key, tenkeyless board. The only thing of note is that you can see they're showing off the sandwich type acrylic construction of the case. We'll see that when we get inside in a moment. But and then we've got the Womier slash GamaKay logo just up here. Otherwise, it's just plain brown cardboard. We have a Banggood barcode here and SKU and things. We have a little sticker here to let us know this is the blue switch version of this board. Just like that. So this particular version comes with clicky blue switches, but it is also available with browns, with reds, I think maybe blacks as well. I'd have to check, but the point being that it has a variety of Gatoron switches with which it can come equipped. Of course, we here today are actually going to be taking those switches out, replacing them with something different, also clicky, but a type of clicky switch that I prefer, Kale Box Whites, and we'll be doing the typing test with those. The whole idea being I want to demonstrate for you guys the hot swap functionality of this board and how easy, in theory, or presumably easy, it makes it to customize. We will find out, of course. Just Womier branding here. Again, they've changed their name evidently to GamaKay, so it might look a little different should you pick up this board. On the back, another stencil image of the board, similar branding, and below OS and interface it says Windows 10, USB interface, model HS-K87, semi-transparent, cable length 1.8 meters, keyboard mechanical, Type-C cable, very good, and some size and weight. Weighs almost a kilogram, actually, surprisingly. Features, it says here. Keyboard made of polymeric methyl. I don't know exactly what that refers to, but oh, I see. Polymeric methyl methacrylate. Methacrylate. But it's frosted acrylic. That's the more common terminology. CNC Techniques says USB Type-C, blah 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 blah. Flash memory, flash storage memory to save last setup automatically. So it does have some onboard memory. an ARM 33-bit controller and key rollover, RGB backlit, RGB underglow, Type-C cable, and some contact info. There we go. And that's it. So let's open this thing up, shall we? So inside we have a very comfily, cozily nestled in keyboard here. We've got a very, very basic user manual, which I seem to recall was the case with the K87 as well. User manual for Womier glazed RGB keyboard. Some product feature, package contents. Here we go. This is what we really need to know about how to control the backlight. That's all down at the bottom there. So we will, of course, take a look at that when we test it out. We've got Chinese on the back, English on the front. Really nothing more there. Very, very straightforward, bare bones. Carrying that theme on, here we see basically nothing other than just the keyboard in this soft touch plastic, and all this foam around the outside. Let's lift out the keyboard. You can hear those clicks and clacks of those blue switches. Okay, so this is actually kind of nice, guys. First of all, the keyboard is very well protected in here. We've got foam on all sides except the top, but it was sunk down into this foam padding, so you can rest assured it will arrive quite well protected and intact. Then we have a PVC sheathed cable in white, of course, to match the board. It is not affixed, it is removable, which is great. USB Type-C on one end, Type-A on the other. Evidently it's 1.8 meters, I believe it said on the outside. It's just bound up by a couple of twist ties, no fancy cable wraps or ties or anything here, but that's okay. No branding on the cable, it's just generic white housings. Put that aside. It's very soft, very pliable. It's got this nice kind of soft touch feel to it. And then we have a few extra pack-ins. Let's just get this box out of the way. There's nothing else in there. It's just this foam insert. And so we've got a few extras here. One included that I very rarely see with keyboards, so this is nice. We've got a little brush, you guys. Isn't that cute? I've seen a couple of keyboards, one from Ajaz, I believe, that came with a little brushy once, but this is for keeping your keyboard clean, for brushing between the keys. And it's a small pack-in, it's just a little plastic thing, but I really do appreciate it, actually. Brushy. Here, do a little brushing up by the ears. Looks kind of like a little trident, doesn't it? That's cute. I appreciate that pack-in. And then we also have, oh my gosh, guys. Okay, let's get these. These are stuck together, but these are two separate items. One's a switch puller, one's a keycap puller. They don't want to come apart. There we go. So our keycap puller is unfortunately of the crappy variety, which is to say it's not a wire type, it's this sort of half loop type, which is not great for your keycaps. It can scratch the keycaps. It's a little harder to use. Would have been nice to see a wire type packed in, but I can't complain too very much. And then we've got this super deluxe looking switch puller, which is just the basic type that we've seen before. But look at this, you guys. It's got like detailed scroll work on the sides. It's got this nice shiny finish. That's actually the most baller switch puller I've ever seen packed in with a keyboard. It will function just like any other switch puller, but it looks fancy. It's a nice little touch on Womier's part. So like 2 out of 3 of the additional pack-ins are great. I appreciate that. Okay. And then of course we have the keyboard. The Womier / GamaKay K87. Oops. This bag, there's really nothing to it. It's just your basic soft touch plastic bag, but it does make nice sounds when you fold it. Nice gentle crinkles. Put that over there. Alright, so here is our board. And as you can see, it is a perfectly standard 87 key, 10 keyless layout. No surprises here. The nice thing about that is that it will work with any keycap set you choose to put on it. Should do, anyway, should be compatible. The case is obviously made of this frosted acrylic, which will diffuse the light very nicely. Not only the backlighting underneath the keys, but also the underlighting. There's LEDs around the outside edge on the bottom side of the PCB, and they diffuse out from the edges and from underneath. They should look very lovely. I expect the overall effect will be very similar to the Womier K87, unsurprisingly. The actual construction of this case is, again, just the same as the Womier K86. It's made of 3 layers of acrylic, kind of sandwiched together like this. And it's very clean. The edges are slightly rounded off, the corners are rounded, and it just goes all the way around like that. Around the back here, we have nothing to speak of except for a USB Type-C port hanging out in the top right corner of the board here. There are no screws visible from the top. There's really nothing to disturb the aesthetic here, which is lovely. If we flip it over, we see that we actually have very easy access to the interior should we want to take this apart and pull out the PCB or do anything with it. We can do that quite easily. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 screws on the back that just use a basic Phillips head. So you could totally take this thing apart should you want to. And we have four feet. Just white rubber anti-slip feet. 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's it. There's no angle to this board. It's perfectly flat, as you can see, so there's no incline. There are also no pop-out feet, so you can't really give it an incline. However, these rubberized feet on the top are a little taller than the ones on the bottom of the board, or the, you know what I mean, at the top, this top versus this bottom. And so it will sit up at a very slight angle, I think, but not much, not much. So you're kind of out of luck if you like typing on an angle. But also, interestingly, no branding whatsoever on this board. Nowhere on it does it say Womier or GamaKay or anything. It doesn't have a model number. There's literally nothing on the board, which is surprising, but I like that. I don't know, I prefer it that way personally, so I don't have any issue with that. It feels a little more custom that way, you know. You can also see all those hot swap sockets. You can see them through the translucent acrylic. Cool, eh? On the PCB there. So, moving back around to the front here, I will say, in terms of the feel, it's got this wonderful soft matte feel to it. It's decently heavy. It's got a very nice solidity to it because it is basically solid. It's just a PCB embedded within slabs of acrylic. And so there's no air in there, really. It's quite solid and got a decent weight to it. It does have a bit of flex, as you can hear. A little bit of creak, a little bit of flex, but that's kind of par for the course with this type of construction. It's pretty much unavoidable because these are big pieces of plastic. There's no metal top plate or anything to add rigidity, so it's to be expected that there's a little bit of board flex there. Now, what I am very curious about here is the situation with the keycaps, because as you may remember, I was not that impressed with the stock caps on the Womier K87. They were UV coated, they were not double shot, they were a bit thin and chintzy feeling, and they were ABS, not PBT. I'm not sure what these are, but we're about to find out. Okay, so this is an improvement over the ones on the K86. These are double shot keycaps. I believe they are ABS. They are a bit on the thin side. You can see they flex a bit. We don't have a lot of thickness on those caps, so they're not going to feel amazing to type on. But because they are double shot, that means they're made of two pieces of plastic that are basically fused together. This white opaque outer and then the translucent white inner that lets the light shine through. Because of that, they will never wear out. They should basically last forever. Let's pull off another one here just to confirm. But yeah, I'm quite certain these are double shot caps. They certainly feel like it. So rather than being like UV coated and laser etched, these are actually two separate pieces of plastic bonded together. And this outer coating, or this outer white part, should never wear because it's not a coating, it's literally just plastic. What I will say though is that the double shot tech, come on, get on there please. There. The double shot technology that Womier / GamaKay is using here is a little primitive. I've mentioned this on other keyboards before, and one of the tells is always the lettering. You see how stencily it is. There are no closed characters, and it's not the sharpest looking legend that I've ever seen. So it looks, fine, but a little bit old school, I guess, a little bit cheap, I suppose. So, they're not the best looking caps I've ever seen. They're certainly not the nicest stock caps I've ever seen. They're a little bit on the thin side, yes, but they are double shot, and that is great. So I would say they are an improvement over what we saw on the K87. A couple more things to take a quick look at here. One, the switches. Here's our Gateron Blue. Typical click slider design, essentially a Cherry MX Blue clone. And the Gateron Blues are more close to a Cherry MX Blue than Otemu Blues are. They're a little quieter, actually, than the Otemu Blues. Much more in line with the Cherry MX Blue. The sound is much closer. But of course, we're going to be replacing those. We're going to be replacing them with some Kale Box Whites, which are much nicer clicky switch, in my opinion. So that's really the overview of the board here. So let's get on with customizing this thing, making it a little nicer using those hot swap sockets. So we have a few items here with which we are going to improve our experience with the Womier / GamaKay K87 here. As I mentioned, or as we saw just a moment ago, by default it comes with Gateron switches, and Gateron switches are actually very good. Gateron Browns are some of my favorite tactile switches for being very smooth and just feeling good, being nice and light and smooth. This particular board came with Gateron Blues, which are very competent Cherry MX Blue clones. So if you like Cherry MX Blues, then you're in luck. Personally, I think Cherry MX Blues and clones are fine, but they're not my favorite type of clicky switch. My favorite type of clicky switch is these guys right here. These are Kale Box White switches. They are available from Banggood for about $30 US, maybe 28, I think, for a 70 pack like this. So they're actually quite reasonable as far as mechanical keyboard switches go. They can get a lot more expensive than that. And because this is an 87 keyboard, we have to get 2 of those packages. I believe you can also get a 10 switch package for quite cheap if you wanted to go that route. You could get the 70 pack and then a couple of 10 switch packs. But of course, Banggood was kind enough to send these over so that we could check them out here today, and I can demonstrate for you the hot swap functionality on the Womier board. One really lovely thing about these particular switches, I'll show you really quickly here, is the click is much cleaner and more precise, I'll say, less rattly than Cherry MX Blue clone type switch. So if we press down on this, very precise click, and on the way up, another little click. So it clicks on the way up and on the way down. The actuation force on these whites is, I believe, 45 grams. I could be wrong about that. Maybe it's a little heavier. Maybe it's 55. So it's going to be similar to a Cherry MX Blue, but maybe a little bit lighter. But it's a much more snappy click. It uses a click bar mechanism, a click bar, rather than a click slider jacket. The Gaterons use this slider jacket. Let's pull out a Gateron here, and I'll let you hear the difference. We will use our very bougie switch puller that came with this keyboard, and we will attempt to pull out this Gateron switch. bougie switch puller. A little trickier than I had expected. There we go. Okay, so as you can see, the two switches are pretty similar, right? They've both got opaque white lowers, translucent white uppers. They both have cherry style stems, but the Kale box switch has this surround around the stem that helps with stability. And then the interior mechanism, as I said, is different. The mechanism that produces the click is different. So if you listen to the Gateron switch, which is effectively a cherry MX blue, it's got a certain rattle to it, doesn't it? Now listen to the Kale box white. It's a much more precise, snappy sound and feel. It feels less mushy and less rattly. I'll do one in each ear for you. I'm going to do the Gateron over here, the Kale over here. Anyway, you know, some people might say it's a subtle difference, and it kind of is, but trust me, under your fingers, they do feel quite different. And personally, I really like the feel of the Kale box switches. So, that is what we're going to outfit this board with here today. As you can see, the Gateron switch popped out very easily, and underneath we have a white PCB with hot swap sockets that will take any switch you want to put on here. That's the beauty of it. This isn't just one of those cheap hot swap type boards with like Otemu only switches or whatever. This will accept any cherry style switch. So that's what allows us to pop in these Kale box switches so easily. We've also got here a couple packs of O-rings. These help dampen the bottom out when you push down on a key. Instead of having a hard bottom out, it provides a springy, softer bottom out. Some people like that, some people don't. I find it helps provide a bit more like literal springiness when you bottom out your key. It feels like it bounces it up a little more. I like that feedback. I also like the sound and feel of the softer bottom out. So especially with clicky switches of these kinds, I like to pair them with O-rings. I find it's a really nice, just a pleasant feeling. But, you know, your mileage may vary on how you like to do that. These are clear O-rings, so they will not obstruct the RGB lighting. They are a relatively soft ring as well. And we might have to stack up a couple of them on some of the taller keys here in order to get proper dampening. And that's why we have 2 packs of 150 a piece. These are also available from Banggood for about $4 a pack, I think. They're quite inexpensive. And finally, Banggood also sent over some keycaps for us to replace the stock ones on here. Now I just finished saying that these are not bad, or they're better than the stock caps on the Womier K87, but they still do leave something to be desired. They're not very thick for starters. They're made of ABS rather than PBT. ABS is a lower quality plastic. Well, I shouldn't say that. It is a fine quality plastic. It's used in all kinds of manufacturing, but it is prone to getting a bit shiny. It wears a little bit over time, and the finger oils tend to shine it up, so you get kind of shiny, smooth patches in the middle of each switch, or keycap, pardon me. Whereas PBT, which is what these switches are made of, doesn't do that. These switches here are something you may have seen before on the channel, because I really like this type of keycap. I keep saying switches, I should say keycaps. keycaps are not expensive, not fancy, but they look great. Yes, my friends, everyone's favorite white pudding cap switches. And what the pudding cap part refers to is this dual layer design where we have this slice of PBT plastic on the top here, which has that nice feel to it, nice matte texture, and it won't shine up with use. Then underneath we have this semi-translucent kind of frosted plastic, right? And so the light comes through, shines through on here. What this will allow us to do is create the ultimate RGB keyboard because, as you know, this keyboard is made of frosted acrylic that shines and diffuses that light, but the keycaps are all opaque except for where, you know, the shine through legends are on the top. By having this big translucent piece on the base here, we're going to multiply our RGB, bling by quite a bit because it'll allow all that light to spill out over the board. I think it's going to look really, really darn good. So these pudding caps are similarly double shot, but you can see that the tech used in them for the legends is a little better. They just look a little bit nicer. Here, let's do an apples to apples comparison here. In my opinion, actually they look very close, don't they? They look very similar. But in my opinion, these guys look a little bit cleaner anyway. A little bit just nicer, sharper. If you look up close, it is kind of apparent. So, the good news is that these keycaps, the full set, which covers a 108 keyboard, are available for about $20 on sales, occasionally even a little cheaper, like 18 or 19. Again, Banggood kindly sent them along so we can pimp our keyboard here in this here video. So you can check those out down at the link below as well if you like. But between the O-rings and the switches and the keycaps, you're looking at about 20, let's say 10 and 30. So what are we at? About $60. This would be another 30, but if you got the 10s as opposed to the extra 70 pack, each 10 pack is I think about $5. So you're looking at about $60 to $70 worth of total modifications here that we're making to this board, which not insignificant, I suppose, given that the total cost of the board on its own is about $80 or $90. But I think these are going to make it look and feel and sound really, really nice. So let's get on with modifying this thing. First step is going to be removing all the stock keycaps. For that, I'm going to use the Vermillo branded keycap puller, this wire style one, as opposed to the plastic loop style one that came packed in, just because this is easier to use and better on the keycaps. This came with our Vermillo VA108M full-size keyboard that I recently reviewed. If you want to check that out, there will be a link here for you to take a look at it. That is one heck of a board as well, with some very, very cool switches, electrostatic capacitive switches. So please do check out that review. Let's get pulling. I'm probably not going to talk much through this process, just because there's not a lot to say, and you can just enjoy the sounds, right? Let's just put this switch back in just for now, just to keep it out of the way. We'll have to pull the switches after, obviously. I hope you like clicky keyboard sounds, because every time I pull Actually, you know what? No, never mind. Every time I pull a cap off here, you're gonna get some clicks. One thing that we didn't look at before, actually, shame on me, is the stabilizers. We didn't look at them because I knew we were going to get to look at them here, but I'm willing to bet that these are not factory lubed. No, there's no way. They're very rattly. Unfortunately so. They are in this translucent white that matches with the rest of the board's aesthetic. They seem to be of reasonable quality, but they're pretty... That's actually not very stable in there at all. This one just wants to come right out. It's not so great. It'll still do its job, but it might rattle a bit more than usual. And we're not going to, mod the stabilizers here. I'm not going to clip them or lube them or Band-Aid mod or anything today. But it is an option. You could do it easily because, again, this thing's pretty easy to disassemble should you want to. Anyway, you could even replace them if you wanted to. There we are. All the caps are off. I like the sounds that keycaps make. Kind of nice, hollow, rattly sounds. I don't know. I just enjoy it. It makes me think of Lego, just kind of back and forth in the hands. Or digging through a big bin of Lego pieces. Okay, so the next step then is taking all the switches. That's the process. It shouldn't take too long. Let's get to it. puller is actually a little tricky to use. There. I just have to get used to it. Also, something to be careful of here is that you could quite easily scratch the acrylic with the switch puller, so watch out for accidental scratches around the sockets. Might pull this back a little bit so that it's a little easier for me to get a good angle on the switches. They do come out pretty easily once you get the puller in position. These are relatively, I don't want to say they're loose sockets, but it's not like they're jammed in there, you know. And it's finished nicely around the edges too. They're not sharp around the edges. They do come out actually really easy, as long as you've got the puller positioned just right. That's it, you just gotta get the technique. So now that we've got our fully naked board here in the nude, it's time to put this thing back together. You know, one thing I am noticing a little bit interesting. Look at that, guys. I don't know if you can see that, but the PCB is actually not secured in any way. It actually shifts around a little bit. Can you see that? Interesting. It's not screwed in at all. It's literally just sandwiched in there, and it's got a little bit of play to it. I don't think that's going to be a huge problem. It just means that when we pop in our switches next, we're going to have to be careful to make sure that the board is aligned properly. Once we get a couple of switches in, it'll be fine because it'll be in the right position. It's only doing this because we've taken out all the switches. Okay, well, hopefully we don't have issues getting it aligned, but we're gonna find out right about now. Let's start in on this. Put these over here for now. So I'm just gonna have to make sure that the contact pins on the bottom of the switch, those little pins right there, happily slot into the sockets on the board here, and that the switch sits happily in its spot. So might have to wiggle it a little bit, but there. I think that's already in properly, and that's pretty much all it took to fix the board in place as well, the PCB. But you know what? Let's just put one of these switches in each corner, so there's no leeway for wiggle like that. Let's just put one in each corner, and that should kind of pin it down, if that makes sense. There we go. You will want to be careful doing that because it is pretty easy to force one of these switches into a socket and bend the pins in doing so. But I don't believe we've done that here. We could verify just to be extra sure. Let's just pop this out to make sure that the pins look happy. They do. So back in it goes. In that same position, and that should fix the board in place and allow us to put in all the other switches without having to worry too much. The other thing is, if we were to bend a pin, it would be pretty apparent when we start using the board because that switch just wouldn't work right. All you have to do is pop the switch out, bend the pin back, put it back in place, no problem. All right, let's switch it up. It's very easy. They just pop in. You don't even have to push that hard. If you're pushing really hard, you're probably doing it wrong. It's probably not aligned right. So all you gotta do is just a bit of pressure, and it should just snap into its socket there. Could not be easier. No soldering required, nothing like that. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. A board full of Kale Box white switches, which of course do go very nicely with the white theme we've got going on here. You know, the white stabilizers, the white board, everything else. And of course, we've got the keycaps. That's the next piece here. So let's do that. For that, though, I am going to turn the board around so that it faces me, because it's a little easier for me to figure out where everything goes that way. But moreover, we've also got our O-rings. So I will be putting the O-rings on the keycaps as we go. Let's get on with that. Let's start by just dumping out a bunch of O-rings here. Let's just get them all out on the table here. Hopefully they don't all roll away on me. But it'll just be easier that way. And then we'll just start on the top row. So the O-rings go on like so. And I think we're going to need a few on these top keys to get them to dampen properly. We'll try it with just one, but I think we'll need maybe 3. So if you listen, we still got a firm bottom out there, so we're going to need more. We'll try 2. Still a hard bottom out. I seem to recall from the last time I did this with these particular O-rings, we need 3 to get it to really dampen properly. That's different. You hear that? A soft bottom out. For comparison, an undampened cap right next to it. Hard bottom out. Soft bottom out. You can hear the clicking in there too, but it's the bottom out sound that we're concerned about. Much different. So for the top row, for these tallest keys, because these are OEM, or pardon me, yeah, they are OEM profile. I almost was going to say cherry, but no, they're OEM profile, which means that the top row is taller than other rows. The top 2 rows, I think, are both pretty tall, so they're going to require 3 O-rings apiece. But once we get down to some of the lower profile rows, they'll probably only take 1 or 2. We'll just have to test it as we go. All right, let's get to it. That's a real nice feel and a real nice sound. You might remember that on my custom 60% keyboard build video from, quite a while back now, I had a very similar arrangement, 60% keyboard notwithstanding. I did have these PBT pudding caps in white, and I did use these similar O-rings, the same identical O-rings. And the switches were very similar, though not identical. The switches I used in that build were Kale Box Heavy Pale Blue switches, which are clicky Kale Box switches, but they're a heavier switch, hence the heavy pale blue. The whites are a close relative that use the same click bar mechanism, but they have a lighter spring in them, so they don't take as much force to press down. That's pretty much the difference. And I thought they would look really nice on this board because we've kind of got this very white aesthetic going on here. So that's what kind of made me decide that they would be a good match, a good fit for this build. And here we have the GamaKay K87 plugged in and looking pretty darn colorful and bright. I will remind you very briefly that, for one, if you are seeing any flickering in the image, which I reckon you are a little bit, that is not visible in person. That's just an artifact of the interaction between the frequency of the LEDs and the shutter speed of my camera, and I tried to minimize it as best I could, but this was about the best I could get, so there's still a bit of flicker. I will also remind you that these are not the stock keycaps on this keyboard. These are the PBT pudding caps that we put on in the previous segment, so please keep that in mind. Additionally, these are not the stock switches because, again, we swapped those out in the previous segment. So the clicking you hear is of Kale box white switches, not the stock Gatoron blues that came on this keyboard. I just think it's important to remind you of that in case you just jumped here, without watching the previous stuff. So just so you know. Anyway, we're plugged in, and the keyboard is looking gorgeous, isn't it? It's looking quite lovely. This is the default lighting configuration when you plug it in for the first time, and it's quite dazzling. We have this rainbow effect coming across the keyboard here, and we've also got a rainbow effect that's kind of running around the perimeter. It's actually technically underlighting. The LEDs are on the underside of the keyboard, and they cast out quite the light, as you can see me holding my hands here. They light up the surrounding desk surface and whatever else, like my tripod here, quite nicely. It's very lovely. So I'm going to now teach you the secrets of this keyboard, because let me tell you, it's actually not straightforward figuring out how to control things on here, because the paltry manual, if you can call it that, slip of paper that came with this keyboard is terrible. It's not only does it not include all of the features, it includes, or it's some of them are wrong, what it explains here. So I will tell you now how it works. So let's start basic. If you hold down function and you press up and down, you can control brightness. So we're topped out in terms of brightness. You can see that the scroll lock and caps lock keys flash to let us know we're at max brightness. We can press down, 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 and we're off there, at least for the main portion of the board. The underlighting, though, as you can see, is still active. So there's a different set of keys that control the underlighting, and that is actually what's not specified in the English part of the manual there. But we'll get to that in a second. In addition to brightness controls, we can hold down function and press scroll lock to just turn the lighting on and off entirely. Again, for the main keys, the backlighting. That combo is actually not given in the manual that I found on Banggood's website, because they have a picture graphic that describes some controls there, but again, doesn't include them all. Function left actually changes the direction of this rainbow wave effect. So you can see it's now going right to left, whereas before, if we go function left again, it now goes left to right. Don't be confused by that. You just press function left to toggle the direction. That's all. So it's not like function left to go left, function right to go right, or anything. Function left is just a toggle. Function right changes the color of the current effect. So here we are with our rainbow wave, but if we wanted to make it solid color, we can do that. We have a solid color red wave now. And you can actually see that for some effects, the edge lighting does in fact change with that control. Although the edge lighting in general does have a separate control, which we'll look at in a second. So there are a number of colors included on board. And the good news is there is software for this board. We will be looking at it shortly, but I will share the software in my Google Drive just for you guys, and I will put the link in the video description. So if you are some poor lost soul seeking software for this keyboard, I will provide it for you, with the understanding that I don't warranty this software in any way. I cannot vouch for it. All I can do is provide it as it was provided to me. Okay, but we'll get to that in a second. Anyway, let's go through some more colors here. So again, you can see that the backlighting and the underlighting are changing together here, and we're back to the rainbow. One thing I will point out is that this board does get very bright. This is like, I wouldn't call it eye-searingly bright, but it is plenty bright. You could quite happily use it on a lower brightness, but unfortunately, something that I've noticed is that the brightness control only affects the backlighting, not the edge lighting. So there is some limited edge lighting control, and you access it by holding down function and pressing left control. Only left control will work. This is not described in the English portion of the manual. It only appears on the Chinese side, which I just happened to glance at, and I noticed it said something about function control. And so I was like, oh, let's try that out. Lo and behold, it was the underlighting. The English part of the paper manual incorrectly describes it as function insert. Function insert, and actually all the nav cluster up here, controls the backlight effects. We'll look at that in just a second, but first of all, let's turn off the backlight so we can see only the underlight, and then we will go function left control, and you can see that now we have a static mode, and these modes will adopt again whatever color your backlighting is set to. It appears that there's no independent color control of the underlighting. It just follows whatever your backlighting is doing. So because our backlighting right now is technically rainbow, we have a static rainbow backlighting or edge lighting effect here, pardon me. So function left control again. We have an RGB breathing effect. Again, we have another breathing where it, or I guess a cycling through the colors, really, it's not a breathing. And of course, I'm calling this underlighting because it is. The reason you can see it so well from the front, though, is because the case is this beautiful acrylic transparent material. And then you can turn it off. So that is an option. You can have it right off. Then we're back to our original effect, which is this scrolling rainbow around the outside. So this is a great moment to really appreciate the beauty of this acrylic case. This is, if you didn't see my Womier K86 review, this may be the first time you're seeing a case that looks like this. It is really beautiful. It is a little bit more frosted than the Womier K66 was. The K66 was a little more transparent. This is a bit more matte, and I actually prefer it this way because the light just diffuses in this gorgeous way across the entire board. I also really love the effect with the PBT pudding caps. And, you know, your mileage may vary on whether you really like having that much transparency, but because of those you know, translucent portions of the caps, we just get to see that much more RGB, and they blend in so well, so nicely with the acrylic of the case. The transparency and the sort of matte nature of the keycaps almost perfectly matches that sort of milky look that we're getting from the acrylic here. So that's really, really nice. I will also point out that the legends on these pudding caps are centered near the top of each key. And on the Womier K66, the SMD LEDs on the PCB, so the circuit board, were actually positioned on the bottom side of each switch. So the switches were actually upside down relative to what they are here. And that meant that the stock keycaps on that board looked good because the legends were centered near the bottoms of each key. But when you swapped it out to keycaps like this, it didn't look so great because the light was not shining through right under each letter. But here on the K87, the LED is under the top of each switch, and it looks fantastic because these centered legends at the top of the keys are in the right place to receive the full light shining through. So I'm really, really pleased with the way these keycaps look on this board. I think they mesh perfectly, and I think it's a really inexpensive and visually striking upgrade for this board. And they feel good too. They feel really nice under the fingers, that PBT material. Okay, so very quickly, let's just cycle through the backlighting effects. Let's turn off the underlight. Oh, interesting. What is happening here? Oh, I think that was here. Let's. One of these was off. Oops, that's not what I meant to do at all. So if you do end up in a situation where you set something the way you didn't want it, you can't figure out how to get it back, function delete or backspace, pardon me, function backspace for 3 seconds will reset the board to its stock settings. So that's no problem. Function scroll lock to turn off that backlight. Function control. There. Okay, so all the lights off again. Let's turn the backlight on. So this is no underlighting now. This is just the backlight. You can see it's a little darker around the edges now. And we are going to go, let's just go through all these in turn. So function insert. We have rainbow breathing effect. Again, this could be any color. It just by default is rainbow, but you can press Control right to cycle through the onboard colors. I'm just going to leave it on rainbow for all subsequent tests here, but just so you know, you can do that. Function insert again gives us a static mode. So if you did just want a fully static board, okay, I'll do this one more time, like a single static color. let's say you want it in that nice red, you can do that, and we can turn on the static underlight as well, and just have a solid static color, and it looks really good in these colors, honestly. It looks really nice. In those solid colors. Okay, let's turn off that underlight again and keep going through the backlight options. So here's a breathing effect. Oh, not breathing, just fading through colors. Right, we already saw the breathing. Under the delete key, we've got the wave that we already saw. We've got sort of a rainbow round. And we've got sort of a different kind of wave effect, which is actually very nice. There's 3 effects under each of the nav cluster keys for a total of 18 effects. Under the home key, we have some reactive modes. So, these guys, pretty typical stuff. We've seen these kinds of effects before on other boards. Under the end key, we have kind of a rain effect, sort of a heavier rain or twinkling stars maybe, and it looks like vertically scrolling colors. Can we change the direction on that one? We can. So defaults to top to bottom, but we can change it to bottom to top. Okay, so that was all that. Under page up, we have a sine wave effect. This actually does look a little flickery in real life. I don't know if that's coming through on the camera, but there's definitely a flicker to it in person for some reason. Oh, the classic shooting in from the edges, swirling around, and then shooting back out. This is kind of nice. This almost looks like Northern Lights to me. That's a pretty one. That's a little different than what I've seen on other boards. Okay. Then under page down, we've got kind of a bouncing back and forth, diagonally lit segment. We've got maybe just another static effect. I'm actually not sure what this is, because we already had the static lighting, didn't we? Under the insert key. And one of my personal favorites, Rainbow Ripple. It can go from the outside in or from the inside out. I really do like the look of this effect. And back to that one. Okay, and then if we wanted to reset it, again, back to its stock settings. Boom, there we are. Very nice. Okay, so that is the lighting story here on the GamaKay / Womier K87. Sometimes it's hard to tell with the exterior. There we go. That's the default again. I guess it was on the default because I reset the keyboard. There are media shortcuts under the function row keys. Typical stuff, nothing too fancy there. And I don't think there's any other secondary function layer shortcuts. So really we've seen everything there is to see on board. I will say it has onboard memory, so when you unplug it and plug it back in, it will have remembered the last setting you had it on, which is great. And it does have N key rollover, which is pretty typical for boards these days, but it's worth mentioning. It means you can press as many buttons as you want without having them stop registering. Okay, so after all of that, why don't we take a look at the software? And here we have the Womier / GamaKay K87 software. I think where I actually got this was off the drop.com page for this keyboard, because it has been sold on Drop before as well. You may still be able to find it there. I'm not sure. I haven't searched recently, but I will still host it in a Google Drive, and you can find that link down below in the video description. So if you are looking for the software for this keyboard, that's where you can find it. But you could also try Drop's page, store page for this board. Okay, so in terms of functionality, the software is very simple, very similar to what we've seen from many other keyboards. Actually, by default, this little lighting check mark is off. We see we have 3 profiles. We are restricted to 3 profiles available along the top here. We've also got a macro editor. We'll just pop that open real quick. It's your basic macro editor. There's nothing too fancy about it. You can create a new macro, give it a name. You can type out or press the keys to record your macro. You can insert pauses if you want. You can edit any particular entry in your macro. So that is basic stuff, and it all seems to work pretty well. We've also got the ability to rebind keys. So that is, as you might expect, we can simply click the key we want to rebind, then we can give it a different keyboard option or action. So, if I wanted to make Q into F, I can do that. You could also pick mouse options here if you want, or there's multimedia options, or you could load a macro. This is, I guess, another way to get to the macro editor. So a variety of options there about what you'd expect. You can reset it using this button. And we are back in action. So you can also edit lighting from here. So if we just check off the light box here, we see that all of the lighting options that we could control in hardware, we can access in software, including classics, crowd favorites like Ripple Graph, Fast Run Without Trace, and the ever classic Microwave Ling. I don't, the classic localization issues, but for what it's worth, this software did install in English. You have the option when you install to install in Chinese or English, and at least everything seems to be understandable in English. It seems that after you've installed it, there's no way to change it. There's no options, nothing like that. I will also say that the software did not connect to the internet or try and ping any remote Chinese servers or anything like that. So it seems pretty clean. I do monitor my network traffic with GlassWire. And yeah, it seems to be doing nothing that would suggest that it's stealing your data and sending it away or anything like that. When it's not open, it runs down in the system tray. It just hangs out there. So, but let's set this to, I don't know, Snow Winter Jasmine. There you go. So you can see it actually takes effect right away, pretty much. You don't even have to click the apply button. The apply button only seems to maybe apply to rebinding keys. I'm not sure. Normally on. That's just the solid backlight. But we can control brightness here as well in the same number of steps that we had in the hardware control, which is nice. You can also set it to an arbitrary color here using the Windows color picker. So let's just, I don't know, let's make it this. Select that. There we go. Yeah, okay, so that totally works. So the full RGB spectrum is available to you, all 16.8 million colors, as addressed using the R, G, and B channels. So that is pretty nice. Color rendering on here seems pretty good. I'm hoping that the colors you're seeing on the camera are accurate. I may have to tweak it a little bit because looking at it in the viewfinder here, it's not quite true to what my eyes are seeing, but the colors are vivid, nicely saturated. As usual, the reds are a bit lacking, a little bit. let's say we go to red here. You know, that's actually pretty good. That's not bad at all. That's looking pretty red. So maybe, although it is a little more on the orangey side, oftentimes you do end up with just not quite accurate color rendition on especially cheaper LEDs. But these are doing a pretty good job. Maybe not the best I've ever seen, but certainly far from the worst. And then with the effects, like the default go with the stream that have direction, you can control that here, just like we could in hardware. Speed is also controllable, which interestingly was not doable in hardware as far as I know, using the onboard controls. But if you did want to slow it down, way down, you can do that, which is nice. The one shortcoming here of this software, I will say, is that there is no underlighting control in the software. It seems like there almost never is on any keyboards that seem to have edge lighting or underlighting. It's very rare to see control for that in software, which is too bad because the control for it in hardware is pretty limited as well. But beyond that, this software is actually more competent than a number that I've seen. It's not amazing, but it's not bad. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's less confusing than many I've used, and it doesn't even look that janky. Like, it's not amazing, but it's not bad either. It basically does what you want it to. It's too bad there's only 3 profiles, but hey, you know, what do you want, right? It's budget Chinese keyboard software. So overall, actually reasonably happy with that software. Decently clean, decently functional, and straightforward. So that is the software story. Once again, I will put a link to it down in the video description if you want to download it from there. Okay, so what remains? What remains is the typing test. And for the third or so time, I will remind you, these are not stock keycaps. These are not stock switches. And I've also put O-rings on these switches, these caps. So what you hear in the typing test is representative of this particular arrangement of hardware, where I've swapped out the switches to Kale box whites, and I've put the O-rings on these pudding caps. It sounds quite nice, I will tell you. It's got a very nice snappy sound to it and a great spring back on those keycaps, but this is not what it'll sound like stock with, say, Gateron blues or whatever, if you were to configure it that way. I just want to let you know, so I'm not misrepresenting anything. This, what you're about to see in here, represents specifically this arrangement of hardware that we have modified here. So, all right, with that PSA out of the way, let's get to typing. Alright, so we have had a chance to do a lot with this board, honestly. We did the unboxing and a very careful inspection of the stock board, as we always do. I then swapped out the switches and the keycaps and added some O-rings onto this board to theoretically improve the typing experience and improve the aesthetics, get even more of those beautiful LEDs shining through for maximum RGB. And I had a lot of fun with that, and I think the results do speak for themselves. You had a chance to see it there when we were looking at the lighting earlier, and also in the typing test. I really hope that you enjoyed watching that, because I think this board looks so darn good after those modifications. I think it sounds pretty good too, but I do tend to be a little biased. I love the crisp click, that snap of a Kale box white. I think they sound just fantastic. So I had a really fun time modifying and upgrading this board for what was ultimately not a whole lot of additional cost when you consider the relatively low cost of those keycaps. The Kale box white switches add a bit of additional cost, but as far as switches go, they're actually relatively inexpensive. So, and of course, I still have those Gatoron blues if I want to slap them on another board or something like that. Anyway, I do hope you enjoyed that modification process. It was a lot of fun for me. I think it demonstrates what's pretty cool about this keyboard, what makes it such a great starter keyboard for somebody that enjoys this aesthetic and is looking for something that's very flexible and that can be upgraded, switches can be swapped out in future. So, all of that aside, it's time to run down the pros and the cons of the GamaKay / Womier K87. Alright, let's get started over here with the pros, the things I really liked about this keyboard. First thing, and most obvious thing, is that immaculate frosted acrylic case. Looks really, really good. Does exactly what it's supposed to, which is amplify and diffuse the lighting of those LEDs into this gorgeous glow that just saturates the entire case and spills out over your desk. It really, really is a unique and fun aesthetic that very few keyboards have. Another pro that works in tandem with that is the underlighting / edge lighting, whatever you want to call it. The LEDs are arrayed on the underside, but around the edge on the underside of the PCB. Whatever you call it, it makes for an even more amplified RGB lighting experience. And you don't get that kind of underlighting on most keyboards, so it's certainly a plus that really adds to the aesthetic in this case. Literal and figurative case. Another thing that really adds to this keyboard and elevates it over its K86 predecessor is the inclusion of hot swap sockets. That means that, as you saw in this video, you can very easily remove the switches, put in your own switches, swap them out on the fly for anything you want, and that makes this a really good starter keyboard for beginning mechanical keyboard enthusiasts or established mechanical keyboard enthusiasts who just want a fun board that they can swap in and play with without breaking the bank. I love hot swap sockets. I wish more boards had them. Another quantitative improvement over the K86 is the use of double shot keycaps on this board. This is something we do see on a number of budget boards, but I specifically wanted to call it out here because the K86 had these kind of lame, cheap UV coated caps. And while the keycaps that are included stock with the K87 are not the best quality I've ever seen, they do have somewhat primitive looking legends, and they are a little on the thin side. They are nonetheless going to be more durable than the stock caps that came with the K86. Another pro about this board, and again an improvement over its predecessor and younger brother, is our older brother, smaller brother, littler brother, whatever, the K86, is the inclusion of software remappability. The software is actually not bad. It doesn't require you to make an account or sign into anything. Installs easily. It does exactly what it needs to without any fuss. And I didn't have to scratch my head trying to puzzle out how it works, unlike some other keyboard software I've used in past. Now, admittedly, the bar is very low when it comes to software for keyboards out of China like this, but it is, I would say, better than most that I've used. So that's a plus in my books. And finally, this keyboard is relatively inexpensive. Yes, it does come in at $80, which is 15 to 20 more than you would typically find the smaller Womier K87 for. But when you consider how much you're getting in this package, the acrylic case, the RGB backlighting, the RGB under and edge lighting, the hot swap sockets, that is a heck of a lot of value at the $80 price point. I do have a few minor cons to nitpick about this board, but they are honestly quite minor. The first is that it has rattly stock stabilizers. They're just not the best, which is not super surprising. A lot of these budget-oriented boards don't have amazing stabilizers. They're not factory lubed. They do rattle quite a bit. I didn't modify them in this video, but it would be fairly easy to do so if you wanted to. And I will point out that one of the stabilizers on the left shift, the clip that keeps the stabilizer clipped into the socket, was broken off just when I received the board. So maybe that's a minor indication of QC issues. I will say it didn't impact the typing experience. The stabilizer still did its job fine, although a bit rattly like all the rest of them, but I figure that's worth pointing out anyway. The stock stabilizers certainly didn't impress. Another thing that didn't especially impress was the rigidity of the board. There is a bit more deck flex there than I like to see. This is especially noticeable when you have the board on your desk and you push down on the middle of the board. You can actually see it bow down a little bit. And the acrylic kind of touches the desk there, whereas the rest of it kind of just sits just above the desk surface because it has those rubberized feet that hold it off the surface a little bit. This is kind of inherent to the type of keyboard that it is. It's made of plastic. There is no metal plate in there to confer rigidity, so I am almost tempted to give GamaKay a pass on this, but I think what they could do to ameliorate the situation is just put another rubberized foot in the middle, right under the space bar there, one at the front of the keyboard, one at the back, and that would really help improve the solidity of the typing experience. Generally speaking, as long as you're not like mashing on it super hard, you're not going to notice this flex. But it was present. I did notice, so I pressed down on it, that it would bow a little bit. So I really think they could improve the design just by adding those additional feet. And the final thing I have to complain about is the relatively limited control for the underlighting and edge lighting. It's not configurable in the software. It's only configurable in hardware. The terribly localized little slip of paper that comes with the board doesn't actually explain correctly how to control it. It is function left control if you've skipped to the end here and are looking for how to control that edge lighting or underlighting. And it's got about like 5 different presets of patterns that you can cycle through, but you can't independently configure the color of the under or edge lighting. It will always adopt the color scheme of the backlighting that you have set. It would be nice to be able to control it independently, and I think having control in software would go a really long way to making it a little bit more usable, I suppose. And I guess as an extra little nitpick, since we're here talking about cons, yeah, that paper insert, I'm not even going to put it on the list here, but it's garbage. Like, it really does not explain well how to use the lighting functions on this keyboard. So don't rely on that, I guess. It would be nice to see something that was a little clearer, a little better localized, and that actually had the right instructions for controlling the backlighting. one final thing that I have to mention here, actually, and it's not related to the keyboard, so I'm not even gonna, again, not gonna put it on the list because it's not the keyboard, and the keyboard is what I'm reviewing. But the PBT keycaps, those pudding caps that I popped on this board, as amazing as they look, they actually were missing two keycaps. They are missing the Z or Z key, depends on where you're from, and the left alt key or right alt. I guess it doesn't matter, they're the same. The alt key, which is like a strange omissions. I've luckily have another set of identical keycaps, so I was able to swap in the caps from that. But if you were to purchase it and you were to be two caps down, you'd probably be pretty pissed off. So I do want to throw out that warning there. I'm sure that if you did go through Banggood's, customer service, they'd set you straight, but you don't want to have to do that. I don't know if I just got a bad sample or what, who knows, right? But anyway, yeah, those keycaps were straight up missing, so buyer beware in that scenario, I suppose. Again, nothing to do with the keyboard. That's specifically for those white PBT pudding caps that I put on this board. So after what has become a very long journey, these keyboard modification videos always end up a little longer than I expect, I think. Have we reached peak RGB? Have we hit the maximum amount of rainbow lighting that you can cram into a keyboard? I think we're pretty darn close. I don't know about you guys, but this thing looks phenomenal. And if you want to know what my final verdict on the GamaKay / Womier K87 is, well, I really, really like this board. It is a unique and fun little board that I'd recommend to just about anyone. Like its smaller brother, the K86, this board is all about that sweet frosted acrylic RGB aesthetic with those beautiful diffuse glowing lights. And if that's your kind of thing, then this is a fantastic board for you. And it improves upon its predecessor in a few very important ways. It's got the double shot keycaps, which are going to be more durable. It's got the software remapping, which is nice to see. And perhaps most importantly, it has those hot swappable sockets, which mean that you can easily pop in and out any switches you want, as I demonstrated here in the video today, which in my opinion makes this a fantastic mechanical keyboard for both starters who are just getting into the hobby. They want something that's flexible where they can maybe experiment with switches and new keycaps in future, but they don't want to break the bank. That makes this a great keyboard for them. It also makes it a great secondary or tertiary or beyond keyboard for enthusiasts who just want something that's a little different, a little fun. It is certainly the cheapest that you're going to find this kind of frosted acrylic case with the hot swap sockets. So really, it's a great keyboard for everyone. Now, I do understand the aesthetic may not appeal to everyone, and if you're looking for something a little more reserved, a little more classic, maybe without just the bright in-your-face lights, then yeah, I get it. You know, you might want to look elsewhere. But if you are looking for a tenkeyless keyboard, you like that frosted acrylic RGB aesthetic, especially if you want those hot swap sockets, this is a fantastic keyboard. I would not hesitate to recommend it to anyone. And that, my friends, that brings us to the end of another relaxing review. Special thanks today to Banggood.com for supplying everything you saw in this video, including the keyboard, the keycaps, the switches, and the O-rings. And if you want to check those out, there are links to all of them down below in the video description where you can click through, pick them up for yourself if you like, and a portion of your purchase does come back to support the channel, which of course I appreciate very much. Thank you for supporting if you choose to do so. And of course, special thanks to each and every one of you guys for watching. I really appreciate you coming out time and time again to watch this content that you put out. I hope that you found it informative and fun as well. This was kind of a fun keyboard build, right? But above all, I hope that you found it relaxing. And I look very forward to having you back here next time for another episode of Relaxing Reviews. Bye for now, my friends.